The following podcast may contain adult language and conversations revolving around situations not suitable for immature audiences. Spoilers and general political incorrectness can often be expected, so listener discretion is advised.
They must be destroyed on sight!
Welcome to another episode of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. I'm your host, Lee Russell, with my co-host, Daniel Harper. How you doing, sir?
Doing well.
Awesome.
Having me as always.
Yeah. We are now on part 5 of our sex comedy series. We're going a long way here, and you've already got your Kevin Smith hat on.
I'm wearing a backwards hat for the Kevin Smithiness of it all.
Actually, your beard is pretty much coming right into Kevin Smith territory again.
You should screenshot this so that you can put a photo up or something.
Well, we'll see here. Print screen. Let's see. Print screen. There we go. Now if I remember to save that in Paint later on. All right. So if you hadn't guessed, we are going to be talking about Kevin Smith films this time around. It's kind of interesting because when we were talking about this, I initially thought Kevin Smith really doesn't necessarily do sex comedies in the vein of the sex comedies we've been talking about so far. So it's definitely an interesting little comparison to put these to the other movies we've been talking about, because his stuff is much more, well, I don't know, I guess in some ways much more mature. Well,
I feel like Kevin Smith is the kind of logical extension in a lot of ways of what we've been talking about. You know, he doesn't really do nudity in his films, other than Zack and Mary Make a Porno has some nudity in it. There are a couple of small scenes in Mallrats, you know, of kind of brief, you know, blink and you miss it kind of nudity, and then the fortune teller character. You know, it's kind of a plot point. But other than that, he really doesn't do nudity in his films. But, you know, we're going to talk about Chasing Amy tonight. And Chasing Amy was threatened with an NC-17 rating in 1997 just for language. And
so was Clerks.
So was Clerks, yeah. He has kind of fought controversy over language and explicit content all his life. And, you know, if you think about the literal meaning of the term sex comedy, it's a comedy about sex. And I feel like Kevin Smith does a lot of the kind of stuff that kind of, I don't want to say elevates the material, but definitely kind of takes these like comedies about relationships and about the hijinks that people get into, and it turns it into kind of higher art, kind of higher material, in the sense of like actually looking at the kinds of tropes that you find in these kinds of other films. And a lot of the same way that like in the 70s, you know, I often think of Kevin Smith with Woody Allen. Woody Allen in the 70s with like Annie Hall was kind of looking at romantic comedy tropes and kind of what sex was like in the 70s, and kind of did a kind of artsy version of that. Yeah. And I think Kevin Smith kind of was doing that, particularly when we get to Chasing Amy. I think that Annie Hall and Chasing Amy there are a lot of parallels, both structurally and, you know, just in terms of their place in the culture. And now we're almost 20 years out from that, which makes me again feel old. I'm sorry, I'm getting into a little bit of the content of our conversation here, but I feel like that when you talk about a genre, you know, if you talk about film noir over 70 years of cinema since it was created, 80 years of cinema, has been a lot of different things. And if you want to talk about that genre, you kind of have to talk about all of it together, unless you specifically want to restrict yourself. But I think that it's more interesting to kind of say, okay, we're going to talk about sex comedies. We're also going to talk about the shitty direct-to-video things like Busty Cops, which don't even deserve the term comedy or sex for that matter. But we're also going to kind of talk a little bit about some of the other stuff. I mean, I think that it adds a little bit more interest to it. And I have in the past, certainly in the past, been a huge Kevin Smith fan. I think we'll get into that a little bit more, but so that's why I wanted to talk about these in this month. So apologies to anybody who wanted to talk about titty flicks again. We're moving away from that just a little bit. Yeah,
but I'm glad you suggested them. I'll just put a little disclaimer on this one. We're not going to go super into detail about these films, except for maybe Chasing Amy, because that might be one where where it kind of stands alone and apart from a lot of his other films. So that might be one to talk about a lot more. But I mean, we were talking off air before we started this that we probably could do just separate full episodes on all three of these films separately.
Right.
There's so much going on. Like he makes so much connections in his View Askew verse or whatever for his different films that we could just sit here listing off trivia and bullshit like that for ages. But
there is one bit of trivia I know I'm going to talk about from Chasing Amy, but other than that, I'm going to try to leave the trivia off the table today because there's one particular thing that I think is just really funny. If you're familiar with the Kevin Smith universe, or at least the View Askew universe, but other than that, I'll get there when I get there. But there is one particular bit of clever trivia that's pretty fun.
First thing we're going to do is we're going to delve right into a little game we've been playing now for a couple episodes. It's real fun. Movie God. I give Daniel two options, either two actors, two directors, two film composers, something to do with film, and he must eliminate one or the other. And once that is eliminated from the timeline, anything that comes after it is also eliminated. So you're supposed to make a hard decision, a hard choice that's going to be near and dear to your heart. And Daniel will also ask something similar of me. This time around, and I'll be quite honest, I didn't put a lot of thought into this one. This one just is one of the like sort of stock ones that immediately came to my mind that's probably been asked a million times. You are movie god, Daniel, and you must eliminate either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone.
That's my immediate thought is, well, I just like Schwarzenegger's movies more as the kind of meathead action hero. The Terminator franchise, well, the first two films in the Terminator franchise are classics, and killing a Schwarzenegger probably means, I mean, then again, maybe O.J. Simpson would be the Terminator, and, you know, who knows how that would change reality, you know? Maybe he wouldn't have killed those people if he, had the Terminator ready to get back on. Who knows? We might be able to actually save somebody's life here. But, no, then I forget, like, Stallone was is an accomplished, like, screenwriter and director as well. In terms of Rocky, it's a little bit tougher than I would think it would be just kind of when you first say the words. If you kill Schwarzenegger, you kill like that. There are so many of the comedic roles, like Twins, for instance, or Kindergarten Cop, that were such a part of my childhood growing up. Stallone was less a part of my personal childhood, but I think he's had maybe a more interesting career, at least his early career.
Yeah.
Then again, if you kill Rocky, Taxi Driver probably wins Best Picture. So or Deer Hunter might have beat Taxi Driver.
I'd say Deer Hunter probably would have, yeah. I mean, a lot of people say, in the 70s, it was the era of movies like Taxi Driver and stuff like that. But no, it was really still the era of the blockbuster sort of coming in. It was more those movies were more the popular films. It's like the other movies gained more critical popularity like 10, 20 years afterwards.
Right. I mean, it kind of became this kind of golden age later, I think, that people kind of looked back on it and saw, wow, look at all these amazing movies. Something like the early to mid-90s, how I think at the time, people kind of knew they were living through this thing, but I don't think that, people realized until like a few years later, like, oh, this was like a temporary thing that only really happened for like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And I'm talking because I really can't decide which one I'm going to kill just because, you get kind of good and bad with both. I think if you made me kill one, I'd kill Stallone.
Okay.
I'd kill Rocky. I'd kill the Rambo franchise. I mean, and the Rambo franchise is his. Like, that was, he was front and center on that. I think that, honestly, just for my own personal preferences, I have a hard time killing Schwarzenegger in the Terminator franchise, and I have a hard time killing him because he did do some pretty funny comedy work later in the 90s and stuff. And Stallone just means a little bit less to me. And that's just it. Sometimes it does just come down to a personal preference of like I would just rather. I think you'd have still gotten a lot of great 70s movies without Stallone, but I think that the 80s fun, goofy action franchises kind of depend on Schwarzenegger a little bit more. You do lose Tango and Cash, but I'll live without Tango and Cash.
That's a good choice. Schwarzenegger's. You could argue Schwarzenegger's action films. Really, that was his decade in the '80s. Like you could argue his stuff was better. Although I will say, going back to a few episodes ago where we were talking about Lance Hendrickson, if you eliminated Schwarzenegger, Lance Hendrickson would have been the Terminator. He was the first choice for that role, apparently. So you could have had a Terminator franchise with Lance Hendrickson as the Terminator.
That I did not know that bit of trivia. That is really interesting. I would again. It feels like that would have been more the kind of the T-1000 idea, with in '84, like to kind of bring that more sleek, physique to the Terminator.
It makes you wonder if Terminator 2 would like feature some big bulky Arnold Schwarzenegger type Terminator coming back to fight the original Terminator.
Yeah, probably. I think that. One day we have to sit down and watch at least Terminator 1 and 2. We need to do those two for one of these podcasts, because if you look at the original Terminator, it's a slasher film. I mean, it's a horror film. Just instead of it being like a zombie or a vampire or whatever, it's this mechanical man from the future.
Yeah.
T2 is for me that's one of those defining moments of my childhood. I was 11 years old when that came out. We bought that on VHS, and I wore that tape out, man. I watched that thing probably 100 times growing up. It's one of those I have it ingrained in my memory.
Yeah.
Kind of movies, And I think really, like you asked me, Hume, I can't kill Schwarzenegger because I just love that movie so much. And I don't know that without Schwarzenegger, that franchise would have gone in that direction. So, you can forget everything that happened after. I have no care for Terminator Genesis. I don't care at all. This is something you can go fuck itself. But
I saw that trailer and it looks like a bad video.
I didn't even watch the trailer. I literally was like, I'm done. I'm done. This franchise means nothing to me anymore. So, that's what I got.
Yeah, good choice. All right, Daniel, you can lay it on me.
All right, and I'm going to ask you another interesting one. This time, I don't think it's going to be hard for you to kill one or the other, but I'm just interested to see. Sometimes I think it's fun to do one where you get to kill something and then change the course of future movie history in a good way, and I want to see which way you're going to go. So,
okay,
you have to kill one or the other.
All right.
Independence Day from '96.
Okay.
Or Armageddon.
Independence Day or Armageddon? Wow. Okay, so Armageddon, that was the sort of small little window where there was really big disaster films from space. I guess maybe there was only 2 films.
It was that one and then Deep Impact.
Impact.
They both came out within weeks of each other.
And Deep Impact was a way better movie.
Deep Impact is the better film.
Yeah. You eliminate Armageddon, that had more star power behind it. That had the more sort of carbon copy adventure storyline with heroic American actors going into space to save the world and all that bullshit. Fuck.
I'm basically asking you to fundamentally change Jerry Bruckheimer's career or to fundamentally change Dean Devlin's career. The guy who, did Independence Day. So after Stargate, what would those guys have made, Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, if not for... Would they have had a better career, or would they have made better movies, or would they have just kind of gone on and done kind of the same shit?
I can't see Roland Emmerich making good movies no matter what happens. Okay, so take away Armageddon, you get Deep Impact. Deep Impact might have influenced smarter sci-fi disaster movies, maybe with a little bit more science behind them, a little less bravado and bullshit. You eliminate Independence Day. That was sort of one of the modern sort of blockbusters, a big launching point for Will Smith's career. I mean,
that was kind of the moment for Will Smith. Interestingly here, Armageddon is kind of the launch pad for Ben Affleck as an action star in a way.
Right.
And Independence Day is kind of the launch pad for Will Smith, which is another kind of interesting thing. Would these guys have gone on and done more kind of interesting acting roles if they didn't have the big tentpole release that set them up? I mean, kill Independence Day, and you basically... I don't know that Will Smith becomes an action star without Independence Day.
Yeah, and that's making me think I want to kill Independence Day, because as much as like when I first saw Independence Day and I liked Will Smith in the role, I was like kind of laughing along with him when he was like punching the crap out of an alien in the desert and shit. I was like, now that I think about it, okay, that he went on from this to do like Wild Wild West and fucking the really bad version of Last Man on Earth, or I Am Legend, whatever you want to call it. I guess he did do Men in Black, but then of course he also did Men in Black 2 and 3.
Right.
And he also had his son Jaden Smith, and his star power allowed Jaden Smith to get movie roles.
Yeah, this would have been an easier question to ask, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Before Will Smith had kind of like tarnished his reputation to such a degree.
You know what? As much as I sort of like Independence Day, I generally hate the way the movies have gone because of Independence Day. I mean, that sort of movie also sort of opened up more Michael Bay style big budget shit like Transformers and garbage like that, and I fucking hate that stuff. I hate it so much. You know what? I think I would get rid of Independence Day, because Armageddon's kind of to me like more of a footnote in movie history than a big influencer. Independence Day, I think, had a lot more influence in the way box office films were made in the next decade or so. So I'd say kill Independence Day, kill Will Smith, kill his son. I'm not advocating child murder, by the way. Well, maybe I am, but
we're removing their careers, not the person themselves. Like, Will Smith went on. He became he had a long and illustrious career doing the stage acting, but never made a movie.
No, he reunited with DJ Jazzy Jeff, and they went on to make some more party albums.
That's a good future. I would like that. Yeah, I want to see what those guys did in like the gangster rap era. That would be interesting.
You think he'd throw Jazzy Jeff some movie roles, though,
Yeah, no.
Make him Vampire number 3 in I Am Legend or whatever.
Maybe they do like a Hustle and Flow, like a Hustle and Flow cut type movie with the two of them,
Or they remake House Party as Kid and Play.
Nice, yeah.
yeah. Independence Day has to go. I have to kill Independence Day. That's no question.
Nice choice. Again, interestingly, just because we're getting into this, I had Armageddon on the brain because Armageddon was kind of the first movie that Ben Affleck did after Chasing Amy. And when they were recording things like the director's commentary for the then Laserdisc, which then became a DVD of Chasing Amy, Ben Affleck was just like coming off the set from Armageddon, like literally in that time frame. And I know that because I've listened to that director's commentary a bunch. So that's probably why I had it on the brain. Like, oh yeah, what if you kill Armageddon?
And let me guess, Smith and them were probably joking about how they weren't probably going to be talking to Ben Affleck anymore in a very soon.
Oh yes, very much.
And that came to fruition very quickly.
I checked on Amazon. You can now buy the Criterion Chasing Amy DVD for literally $5 right now.
Oh, really?
And I couldn't find my DVD. It's also streaming on Netflix. So when I rewatched it for this podcast, I did watch it that way.
Yep.
It's literally one of those discs that was a flipper disc. If maybe the younger listeners don't even remember what the flippers were, but it's a flipper. I'm probably going to rebuy that just for $5. It's probably worth throwing $5 that way just to own that, to make sure I have a copy of it and didn't loan it out to somebody and never got it back. Just for the special features on that disc, including that commentary, which is fascinating, and which, again, I'm going to get into a little bit when we talk about Chasing Amy. So
that's cool, because usually when you go looking for old Criterion discs, especially DVDs, they're upwards of $50 or more. Yeah.
No, I checked it. I checked it just yesterday, just last night. I was looking at it, and I think it was $5. So now,
Sweet.
Listeners, don't buy that until I have a chance to buy one. So, to create a rush on the Chasing Amy discs. It's thousands of people going and trying to buy it immediately.
That's all right. Going by our numbers so far for our audience, you'll only be competing with maybe 4 people, so that's all right.
It'll really just be Paul I'm competing with.
It'll be Paul and 2 of his sock accounts, and I don't think he's going to be buying any Kevin Smith films anytime soon.
Yeah.
So.
There's a reason he's not on this podcast today, right?
Yeah. All right. So we should move on to what we've watched in the last week or so. So I know you've got a couple things, Daniel, so I'll let you go first.
Sure. The big one that I think is interesting is we actually did. So I mentioned last week on the podcast or last episode, we were, my wife and I were talking about going to see The Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of low on funds, and we kind of decided we only had money to see one movie this pay period. And the reviews in The Avengers were not that great.
Mm-hmm.
And it will still be in theaters in 2 weeks. So we said, you know what? Let's go see Ex Machina instead.
Cool.
Ex Machina, I literally just saw the title. I saw the general premise and went, I don't want to know anything more about it. So I walked in blind. I would highly recommend walking in blind. I think it's a really interesting film. Shana liked it a little less than I did. Structurally, she had some other issues with it. Sorry, Shana, my wife, for audience that may not know who I'm talking about. But my wife didn't like it as much as I did. Thought it was really interesting. She thought the ending didn't quite stick. I think the ending was exactly what it needed to be. So, it's a film about artificial intelligence. I'm really not saying anything about the plot or the story of the characters because I think if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know what the movie is, it's worth going to see regardless. I think you should definitely check it out and know as little as possible about it. But a really interesting film, very thoughtful about artificial intelligence and what that means, and has a lot of really interesting representational issues for the way that we treat women in cinema, honestly. So, really, if you see this, Lee, we should definitely talk about it in detail on the podcast.
I intend to see it. I was definitely interested in seeing it at some point.
It's actually the directorial debut of Andrew McDonald, something like that. He was a screenwriter of 28 Days Later. And
okay.
A bunch of the other, I might have his name wrong. I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize. But the screenwriter of 28 Days Later and a bunch of Danny Boyle's early films. And he is now directing. And it's definitely a very assured directorial debut. I'll just say that. Definitely worth checking out.
Let's see. Yeah, Andrew McDonald. Yep.
Wow, I had the name right. Yeah, you can edit out all my...
No, is it Andrew McDonald or Alex Garland? Alex
Garland is the director.
No, Alex Garland wrote 28 Days Later.
Okay, it's...
Andrew McDonald produced the film.
Oh, it's Alex Garland then. Excuse me.
Okay.
I got the names confused.
Anything else?
Anyway, saw that one theatrically, definitely worth it. The other thing is we cut the cable this week where we just decided to stop paying $80 a month to a cable provider to feed us bullshit television.
Mm-hmm.
And meaning that I've been going through my DVD collection, just kind of throwing them on as just something to have on during the day or, before bed. And so I've watched a lot of the old movies that I just own on DVD. Glorious Bastards, I rewatched that this week. I actually rewatched Empire Records, which I hadn't seen in a long time.
Oh, wow.
Partly because I was thinking about recommending it for this podcast, and partly because it's kind of a companion. It's sort of like when, right after Clerks, they decided to remake Clerks with more money.
Yeah.
And they called it Empire Records. And it's a very different film than Clerks, but definitely interesting. It's very much that slice of a moment in the mid-90s when that was like the coolest thing in the world. Again, Shana kind of grew up with that. Like she was, I think, 10 when that came out, 10 or 11 when that came out. I was a little bit older. No, that came out in 96 or so. Anyway, she was young. She was young enough for it to be like a very formative influence on her life. She's like, she was rewatching it with me, and she says, how did I not know things about myself at that time? Because I'm attracted to every single person in this movie. And I'm like, yes, I know exactly why. It's a bit of cheesy fun. It's worth rewatching if you're going to sit down and watch a DVD sometime soon. And the only other one, just because I watched it last night and it's a lot of fun, I rewatched The Incredibles. The 2004 Brad Bird directorial debut. Or not debut, sorry, Iron Giant was first. But his kind of big thing with Pixar. That is really worth a revisit. That is such a great film.
It is. I love that film a lot, yeah.
But I watched more than that, but those are the three I wanted to bring up. So
cool. Right on. The only thing I really watched, other than the films for the podcast this week, I was just sort of trolling Netflix because I was bored, and I found Joyride 3. And I like the original Joyride. I saw Joyride 2, which I wasn't all that fond of. And this was actually, surprisingly enough, not too bad. It was, for a low-budget sort of direct-to-video or VOD kind of film, had fairly good production. The story was a little bit better. The acting was a little bit better than what you might have expected. Although, essentially, it sort of ruins the whole Rusty Nails character from the first film, because you see and hear way too much of him. He just sort of turns him into a typical slasher villain instead of this sort of mysterious killer that you don't see, more in the sort of mold of Duel or whatever, where that faceless truck driver that you never see in that film. So, but it was decent. It was actually worth checking out. It's just one of those ones where you see on Netflix where you usually have second thoughts. You're like, I don't really need to see this garbage. But I mean, if you got a lazy night on Netflix and you like the first Joyride, it's actually kind of worth seeing. So, yeah.
Kind of worth seeing a ringing endorsement from Lee Russell there.
You could do a lot worse. Like, there's so much garbage on Netflix that this was actually slightly better. And trivia note, the guy who plays Rusty Nails in this one, he actually played Jason in Freddy vs. Jason from a few years back. Although, sadly, it doesn't have, what's his name? Is it Ted Levine, I think, did the voice for Rusty Nails in the first film. Very distinctive voice.
What's funny is I know him. I know that actor from Monk, if you know that TV show.
Yeah, that's him. That's him. I always think of him from Heat as one of the secondary cops who gets.
Oh, is he in Heat? Wow.
And of course, he's also in Silence of the Lambs as a killer there.
Right.
Yeah. But I believe it was him. I'm convinced it was him. I don't know if they credited him or not in the first Joyride, but I'm pretty sure it was his voice they used. They used a different actor for the actual role of the character when you see him in the film, but they use his voice on the CB. I still remember, he's just taunting his victims over the CB. Candy cane, where are you? But
awesome.
So Joyride 3, ring an endorsement for that one. If you're bored out of your skull,
or you could go see Ex Machina in theaters.
Yeah, that might be a better option
if you don't mind spending the $10 or whatever it costs you to go see a movie these days.
Hello, this is Guillermo del Toro. When I'm not making movies about bugs, monsters, fawns, monsters fighting giant robots, bugs, and fawns, I'm listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, a movie podcast. All right, so I guess we'll move on to the movies. We are going to start with 1994's Clerks, written and directed by Kevin Smith, starring Brian O'Halloran as Dante Hicks, Jeff Anderson as Randall Graves, Marilyn Gigliotti as Veronica Loughran.
I actually know all these characters, all these actors' names.
Awesome. That's good, because I'll probably screw more of them up. Lisa Spoonhauer. Well, that's quite the name. As Caitlin Bree,
yeah.
And of course Jason Mewes and Kevin Smith as Jay and Silent Bob. You could go into exquisite detail of the importance of this film, but I don't know if we necessarily need to do that for anybody.
If you're listening to this podcast, you probably already kind of know who Kevin Smith is, and you probably have developed an opinion one way or the other about it. Yeah, it's the day in the life of a couple of slackers who work in a convenience store and a video store, respectively.
Yep. And it essentially revolves around Brian O'Halloran's character, Dante, who, by all respects, is kind of a loser, but in another respect, he doesn't know how well he has it, because he's constantly juggling women. and so basically what he's doing here is he's trying to decide whether to stick with his current girlfriend or get back with his old flame, who he's heard is getting engaged. and he's basically stressing over that while working on his day off because he got called in because no one was available. And although the movie essentially kind of more focuses on the day-to-day life of someone working a retail job and sort of vignettes of weird characters that Kevin Smith himself experienced while working that very job in that very location, it really does have an underlying sort of sex comedy thing going down about relationships. I'll let you start with any thoughts on this, Dan.
Sure. Again, we all kind of all know the lore, I think. Although I don't know how much younger listeners, if you didn't kind of live through this area of film, I don't know how much you kind of know. Maybe Kevin Smith more as he's that guy who's on the podcasts or Comic Book Men, or maybe the more modern stuff that he's doing, the kind of experimental horror stuff that he's doing. But Kevin Smith was 23 years old when he made this. He maxed out his credit cards, he sold his comic book collection. He made Clerks for $29,000. It shot on 16mm black and white. If you read the closing credits, one of the credits is the boom operator was whoever grabbed the pole. That's literally how the boom operator is credited. There's a famous story about Kevin Smith was literally working in the convenience store during the day and then shooting this at night, and literally fell asleep from exhaustion during the last take of the film, just collapsed. Could not be woken for some time. I think it's worth noting that these three films are very deeply autobiographical in terms of Kevin Smith's experience. We'll kind of talk about that again, particularly when we get to Amy. I think Chasing Amy is very autobiographical in a different way, but this is Kevin Smith casting a guy who kind of looks like him, working in the exact job where he works with a friend of his working next door. It's kind of known for, I think today you watch it and it's kind of hard to realize how groundbreaking this was in a lot of ways in 93, 94, just because now we're kind of used to people talking about pop culture in movies, and to the degree that that's a cliche and that gets annoying. We're kind of moving away from that now, or we've been moving away from that for a while. And the vernacular of making a Star Wars reference in a movie, or kind of doing that kind of metafictional thing, that talking about the structure, is something that we're just kind of used to in films these days.
Yeah.
But in the early 90s, starting with, Slacker maybe in 92 and Reservoir Dogs, this was really, really new at this point. I think the fact that it just kind of seems like a normal movie now is probably a credit to the film. I think it's aged well as well. I think that Kevin Smith always gets the, knocked for, you make movies that look like crap, and I think Kevin Smith brings a lot of that on himself because he kind of says that, and then people just go, yeah, it does look like crap. But, I don't think if you were given $29,000 in 1993 to make a film, I don't think that anybody could do that much better than he does, than they did in this situation. I think that they're constantly changing things like camera angles. They're constantly shooting things in different ways. It's definitely a low budget film, but it's not. It looks good. It looks fine for what it is. And I think you can't compare it to something that costs 100 times as much and expect it to add up.
Yeah, it kind of. I always felt it kind of had the feel of because they chose to do black and white just based purely on the fact that they didn't have enough money for proper lighting. So they wanted to eliminate that problem right away. But it kind of gives you the feel that you're actually at some point looking at this through a video surveillance camera in the actual store.
Right.
Just to a certain degree. So it kind of feels like the viewer's looking at these people's lives through that lens almost. So that I think that's actually works really well for the film. It's a pretty good strength for it. And Kevin Smith, and of course this goes back to him shitting on his own movies all the time. He'll readily admit he's not the most gifted cinematographer type guy. He has a knack for dialogue that I would even argue in some respects is better than Quentin Tarantino from the same era. But he definitely does not have the visual flair that Tarantino has. But he hides it very well. He doesn't make any pretenses. He doesn't try to go out of his bounds. He knows what he can do.
I think the comparison, I think my earlier comparison that I made is very apt, Lee. Apologies. Talking about Woody Allen, Woody Allen is also not a filmmaker whose visual style, is not a stylishly visual filmmaker. You don't go to a Woody Allen film because you're interested in fancy camera moves and, visual style. You're interested in watching the story and watching the characters and watching and listening to the dialogue. And I think Kevin Smith is definitely that guy. And the fact that he's kind of moved on into being a kind of a podcast guy, that words are his weapons, words are his stock in trade, I think kind of speaks volumes for, kind of what the pleasures of these films are. Speaking more specifically about Clerks, I think it's interesting, a 23-year-old kid. I mean, I'm amazed. Like, I first saw Kevin Smith films when I was maybe 16, 17, kind of that time frame in my life. And, I thought, oh, wow, like 23 years old, that's awesome. Now I look back and go, this guy is 23. Like, I remember what I was like when I was 23, and I certainly didn't have the maturity that is shown in this script in terms of like relationships and that sort of thing. Kind of amazing how this film just works. I think that rewatching again all three of the films, I'm gonna kind of talk about Kevin Smith in general. I think these really they work on the structure of having the kind of buddy structure. You've got in this film Dante and Randall, and I think they each represent kind of like the conversations they have are conversations that Smith has with himself. Like they're kind of a split psyche where the kind of the asshole character, in this case Randall, is kind of like he's a jerk. I mean, he's just a jerk to everyone around him, except arguably to Dante, but he's kind of even a jerk to Dante, and he's got his issues, but at the same time he's grounded in a way that Dante is not, and he is aware of his station in life. He's aware of kind of who he is. He's more comfortable with who he is, and he's able to kind of dispense the wisdom that I think Dante needs, particularly towards the end, saying like, dude, you've got these two girls, they both want you, but you're afraid of making a decision. You're afraid of going out and getting what you want out of life. And I think that, when I was younger and first saw these films, I didn't quite get what was really going on. But as an adult, I definitely see like there's a maturity there to the filmmaker being able to write those scenes. Yeah,
I think when he was writing this, I think he was probably writing this under the assumption that he was probably never going to make another movie again.
Right.
So he did his damnedest to put basically everything he was thinking and feeling into the script and making it actually work. It's popular now to look at Kevin Smith and, oh, he's the dick and fart joke guy. There's a level of maturity in the writing for Clerks that you wouldn't see in a guy his age, in any other guy his age doing this sort of thing. And the decisions that Dante eventually has to make. I mean, the guy is just so clueless. Like, so the guy is almost like you're saying, like they're both sort of sides of Kevin Smith's personality, Dante and Randall, and they're almost self-criticisms of probably the way he was at some point in his life, like just how immature I was.
Well, particularly in terms of like sexual maturity, and I mean, if we're talking about sex comedies, I think you have to talk about the sexual content of these films. We have spent the last few weeks kind of looking at titty movies, and we can, which are kind of made for the puerile 13-year-old and all of us. Oh, look, boobies, and yay, yeah, I'm a big fan of that. The person of me that wants to see naked flesh is now satiated. This is someone, when you have him have a character watch, chicks with dicks porn, which, some of this is not aged all that well, but, this certainly, chicks with dicks that put mine to shame. And you have them having really frank and honest conversations about like jizz moppers and really talking about these kind of raunchy, dirty things, but then also talking about what it is actually like to be in your early 20s in this kind of environment where kind of everybody knows everybody else, and you kind of, oh, I hooked up with her at this party, such and such, kind of talking about your sexual escapades in not a bravado kind of way, but just in an honest kind of way.
It deals with the consequences of sex, and and more so it deals with Dante's inexperience in his sort of naive way he's been going about relationships. It's essentially like all this stuff just comes back from the past and hits him all of a sudden, that all the stuff he didn't know, he's not comfortable with it because, he feels... and I think this is a theme that actually goes on to Chasing Amy as well, where he obviously feels befuddled and inadequate to some degree because of all these people around him having all this interesting sexual experience, and he's sort of felt left out, and he doesn't know what to do. He's almost sort of old-fashioned and sort of stuck up about sex, although he's also hypocritical because there's that conversation he has early on with his current girlfriend in the film, where he finds out that she went down on 36 guys before him.
Right.
And
well, when he says the line, well, now every time I kiss you, I'm going to taste 36 of the guys. And again, Smith gives the girl in the situation the right line. Like, well, you slept with 12 other girls, or 11 other girls, and that's not a big deal, but me sucking some dick is a big deal to you. It confronts, the fact that you have the kind of author avatar, the director avatar in Dante kind of, being upset by this, but also you have the other characters kind of responding and going, dude, get over yourself. And speaks to the fact that there is something more going on. I think that, it's very easy, I think, to read these films, and I think a lot of, Kevin Smith's fans at the time, a lot of the people that kind of fell in love with it, were like, yeah, fuck yeah, man, you shouldn't be with a girl that sucked 37 dicks. And it's like, I don't think that's an opinion that Smith would agree with. I think
no, yeah, I think
it's kind of about that, and particularly when we get to Chasing Amy, which is very explicitly about this issue. Yeah,
there's definitely, like, with the wave of popularity with anyone, there's definitely the people who take the wrong message from this film coming out of it, and whatever, that's fine. Whatever you get out of a movie doesn't really bother me. It's like, you get this out of the movie, someone else gets something different out of the movie, that's fine. If you're just entertained on a base level because this movie has a lot of really funny sex jokes about sucking 37 dicks and snowballing and and fucking a dead guy in the bathroom,
right.
that's great. But Smith was definitely going for something a bit deeper in the actual script, and the dialogue he writes is surprisingly mature and well done. There are some problems in the film, like, and it just goes with the amateur nature of the film, that some of the actors maybe deliver the lines a little stiffly or maybe a little too quickly, so it doesn't always sound like real conversation. But when they do hit their mark, they hit it really well. Like, I think as you watch the film, Dante and Randall, as the actors got more familiar and comfortable with each other, their conversations become a bit more naturalistic and sound a lot more real as they go on.
Absolutely. It's also worth noting, Smith wrote this stuff, and the actors, Smith even says, like, when he had to get to the point, like in Chasing Amy, he has a long monologue in a restaurant. And he said, I never actually had to, like, say this stuff that I keep writing for people until that point. And once you realize you gotta, then you're like, okay, we gotta cut some of this. It's a very, he definitely got better at kind of mixing the loquaciousness of the characters and his kind of distinctive style, and, like, then actually making it sound like stuff that people would say, as opposed to something that philosophy majors would write at each other, sort of thing. I do agree with you that the acting kind of leaves a little bit to be desired. It's certainly not a perfect film. It's worth noting that Brian O'Halloran was and is still a stage actor primarily. He trods the boards in New Jersey. He acts on the stage. He's been in a couple of films, but nothing really serious. Jeff Anderson was not an actor.
Yeah,
he didn't even have and this is where I'd show you what a super geek I am. I actually not only own the original Clerks DVD, I own the 10th anniversary DVD.
That's the one I have, yeah.
Which includes the original casting sessions for these people. And Jeff Anderson didn't even have he didn't have a scene that he did. Like, if you're an actor, you kind of have the scene that's like you're going in, and he didn't have one, so he just read lines out of the Clerks script and was cast based on that. He was just kind of this guy, like, not like a close friend of Kevin Smith's, just somebody Kevin Smith knew and said, okay, if you want to be in the movie, come audition, and he got the role. And I think he's, honestly, he's probably one of the best parts of the movie is Brandon,
he has a natural knack for it. Smith was originally going to cast himself in that role, but instead he becomes Silent Bob and only has basically 2 or 3 lines in the whole film.
Right.
But in O'Halloran, Dante, He does a really good job. Like, when I'm watching the film, I'm physically cringing at times for some of the stuff he's doing. I'm just like, why, dude? Why are you so stupid? Why are you so dumb? But it's honest too, because you've known people that are that dumb, that are, they haven't matured enough to make a decision in their lives, and especially to make the right decision. He just makes all the wrong decisions all the time.
He makes some really bad decisions. I mean, not least because, and here I'm gonna kind of move us into Clerks 2 a little bit more, if you don't mind, because we're kind of talking about these together. I mean, Clerks, the original Clerks is definitely, this is who Dante is, the person that, in terms of his situation in life, working at the Quick Stop, making change, selling cigarettes, etc. That's the life that Kevin Smith had before Clerks. And Clerks 2 is sort of Kevin Smith kind of coming to this stage in his life where he is amazingly successful, where he has this enormous success in terms of his career. He's making movies, he's a millionaire, he's got a wife that he loves and all this sort of thing. And saying who would I have been if Clerks had just failed, And I, to the degree that the first Clerks is kind of about feeling like you're stuck in a rut in your life, you have no direction in your 20s. Clerks 2 is about that same thing, but now you're in your 30s, and you feel like life has left you by, and you're like, well, is this all there is to life? Is this all, is this what it is? And I think you and I can both, and I think a lot of people in the economy, this movie, Clerks 2, was made in 2006, and the economy created in '08, but I think that a lot of people, like, looking at that, can definitely see the economic conditions where, you graduate from college maybe, or you don't go to college and you're trying to get a job and you scrape by and feeling like, man, wasn't there something else I could be doing with my life than slinging burgers? I think Clerks 2 speaks really honestly to that feeling of being at an age where you feel like, if I was going to do something, I would have done it by now, and then not having done it. So, I don't know. Moving on to Clerks 2, not to try to control the podcast, but any thoughts to that or anything else about Clerks 2?
Yeah, I think Clerks 2 in a lot of ways even works better than Clerks 1. You compared the two films, like, I watched them back to back. I rewatched them back to back today. I watched them a bit earlier in the week, just sort of casually, but I sort of watched them seriously today. You definitely see Kevin Smith as a filmmaker, how much he's matured, where his style hasn't necessarily changed a whole lot, but he's just more competent in the stuff he was doing in Clerks to begin with.
One of the differences is that starting with Dogma, he had a professional cinematographer. The first three films, Clerks, Morris, and Chasing Amy, he was working with Dave Klein, who was just a friend of his that he met when he did his 2/3 of film school thing in Toronto. Just a guy he knew, basically, who was enough of a cinematographer to be able to. But starting with Dogma, he actually had a professional DP, and that you see a dramatic difference, particularly with Jay and Silent Bob Straight Back Forward. His films look like films at that point, just because he's got a professional DP. Anyway, not to interrupt, but that's a lot of the visual difference right there.
Yeah. So this feels like a more in the vein of Jay and Silent Bob. Dante finds himself in the same situation he was in Clerks. He's juggling two different women, and in a way, Dante has not matured at all. Like, he has not progressed at all from Clerks. He's still the same guy. He's still got the same problems. He still takes things the wrong way and makes the wrong decisions. He had a one-night stand with Rosario Dawson's character.
Because who wouldn't?
Yeah, who wouldn't? Yeah, exactly.
Rosario Dawson is one of my favorite just visual stunning actresses of all time. The bouncing titty scenes in the dancing to Michael Jackson is definitely one of those things. Highlight of cinema for me.
They make a pretty good knowing reference to that too, like how they're talking about how she likes him even though he's basically a fugly chud, as they say in the movie.
They call him a chud like 4 times, I think.
Yeah, they even call his unborn baby a chud.
He is fucking chud of a kid over there, man.
Yeah, so he's still. I mean, he hasn't changed. Randall hasn't changed either, but Randall's content in not changing as long as he's got his best friend with him.
Right.
And then that's the real conflict in the movie because Dante's going to let himself get swept away in this new life with Jen Swalback's character. Kevin Smith's real life wife, where he's going to go to Florida, he's going to run a car wash, he's going to get a house given to them by her rich parents and all this other stuff.
Again, tropes that we remember from Malibu Bikini Shop. You know, I mean, this is like a recurring trope. I'm going to go marry this girl that I don't really care about. You know, I mean, and her daddy's going to set up my life, and I'm going to have a comfortable life, or I can go be with the hot fun girl that I actually like. Only in this case, you know, again, just kind of talking about like the sex comedy tropes, you know, in Malibu Bikini Shop, the whole point is, well, this girl's really hot and she looks good in a bikini. Whereas I think what Kevin Smith does is he kind of takes that and kind of grounds it in reality. This is a girl who will like sit and talk about ass to mouth with you.
Yeah.
Who you actually like have chemistry with and like spending time with, who you paint her nails in her office when you should be working. I mean, my God, this is, he paints his other girlfriend's nails in Clerks.
Yeah.
So many repeated motifs, but actually, you know, puts forward the idea that like actually having things in common with this person is a good thing, you know?
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting if you look at it as a trope, as you know, Kevin Smith kind of tweaking that trope of like, okay, you don't get to be with the boss's daughter or whatever. Go be with this girl you actually like.
Yeah, because Schwalbach's character, I mean, and they don't treat her character like a one-dimensional just caricature either. I mean, she's obviously a woman with feelings. She obviously actually does care about Randall, and she wants to sweep him up in this life and everything. And what happens to her is unfair as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she is cheated on by her fiance with this woman he works with, you know, at work. You know, they got drunk and they fucked. Mm-hmm. And then he doesn't even have the balls to break up with her, you know, honestly. He just, you know, it kind of works out. I mean, you know, definitely, I mean, I think that Jennifer Schwalbach's character is portrayed as a kind of an unpleasant person in general, just not like someone that, but I think she gets her moment and she gets her, I mean, she is definitely wronged in the film, and she is right to behave the way she does towards the end of the film, I think.
Yeah, you know? well, they Rosario Dawson's character makes mention that she's the kind of girl who wouldn't have paid attention to Dante in high school. She's just a person who's probably been with enough to throw back to another character in the View Askew-verse, the Rick Darrises of the world. She's probably been with enough of them in her time where she's finally realized that, hey, I need to find myself a guy who's going to appreciate me and, you know, actually.
Remember the blonde girl in the van? You know, I kind of think like this is Jennifer Schwalbach here is kind of that character all grown up. Like she was, because she's with Dugan. And the blonde girl in the van, she's with Dugan, right? And Dugan and Rick Darris are definitely, you know, it's the same trope, right? In fact, when we were talking about Dugan, I kept wanting to call him Rick Darris. It was just a moment I had to force myself not to. But, you know, you talk about, you know, she was with this guy. I mean, you can kind of imagine her backstory. She's kind of with this guy for a while. He doesn't treat her very well. Her looks start to fade, maybe. She gets a little bit older. She moves on, and she says, oh, there's this guy who will just marry me, and I can be with this person, and I can have this picturesque life, I guess. And, you know, I don't really care what he has to say, but, I mean, I guess I like him well enough to be with him. You know, we don't really get the backstory of how they met and how they became a couple or anything. But, you know, it's not hard to envision, you know, I don't know. I grew up in a small town. You kind of know everybody. You kind of get the feeling of like, you know, oh, this is just plenty of the people that I know who are in couples in my hometown are people who just kind of fell into it. One day, you know? No,
that's the thing. The relationships in these films, they feel like real relationships. Like they feel like the kind of thing you see all the time. So and of course when bad things happen in these relationships, like Jennifer Schwalbach's character being wronged, it sucks, and she's not perfect or anything, but it feels like a real moment rather than just something that has to move the story along. You know, it feels like it feels realistic to me because shit like that happens to people all the time. So,
I mean, there's definitely a cartoony element to this, and I think that, most obviously you can talk about
when he drops a musical number into the middle of the film.
Well, there's definitely that. I mean, that's just straight up fantasy sequence,
Yeah.
But I'm thinking in terms of the Elias character in Clerks II, who is this kind of caricature of kind of fundamentalist Christian upbringing. But I've known people like that. I grew up in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with people exactly like that.
We've got a large contingent of both Mennonites and Mormons,
sure,
and Jehovah's Witnesses here in Nova Scotia. So I encounter these people on a daily basis almost.
I mean, and it is kind of a loving ribbing, kind of a subculture to some degree, because he's not a bad kid. He's just kind of naive and a little blinkered, and he's working with these crazy characters, but he's accepted as one of them. Like they kind of josh back and forth. But you kind of see that he's kind of got this cartoony response to the donkey show. Which we got to mention the donkey show at some point. The pillow pants moment as well. I mean, there's definitely a cartoony element, but it's also played in a way that you kind of buy it as like, okay, it's in this cartoon universe, but it isn't so far gone that there isn't like a real like core to this character. Like you still kind of buy it as
the way I think about it. Have you ever seen the Kevin Smith's sort of Clerks cartoon? Have you ever seen?
Oh yeah, I was actually going to ask you if you'd seen the animated series.
Yeah, it seems like some of the way that went sort of bleeds into Clerks II. So you get more of a mixture of the reality and the sort of surreal, cartoony elements sort of come out that way. And like Elias' character is much more lends more to the cartoon than he would, like he wouldn't fit at all in Clerks I, at least not in the way he's portrayed in Clerks II.
Right. Well, and Chasing Amy as well. I mean, Clerks and Chasing Amy are a little bit more the kind of, okay, this is the real world.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a comic distillation, whereas the other films in the Views universe are much more kind of pushed towards this kind of straight up comedy universe kind of thing. Particularly when you talk about Mallrats and Jay Silent Bob Strike Back, which is, I mean, just straight up cartoon.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. Like, you feel like you watch all these, if you watch all 5 films in order, they do exist in different universes. Just, kind of, they influence each other, but you definitely can't say that Mallrats and Chasing Amy and Clerks II follow directly from one another. They just kind of like bleed into different universes to some degree.
Although the interesting thing is Mallrats is set a day before Clerks.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the Elias character though. Very entertaining. You get all the sort of best moments because everyone basically riffs off him, right? All the characters are basically making fun of him or standing up for him, depending on the situation, And it worked. And I mean, yeah, he is that sort of fundamentalist Christian character that would be easy to just really take a dump on, but he treats him with an amount of respect. Smith does. I mean, Smith comes from a Catholic background. He's not necessarily a practicing Catholic anymore, but he sort of understands that mindset and where that sort of.
Smith is definitely religious. I mean, he's absolutely a religious man, was at this time, but also kind of understood the foibles of religion. I mean, if you ask Kevin Smith, are you Catholic? He is absolutely a Catholic. He thanks God in the credits of every one of his movies. I mean, there's no question that Kevin Smith is overtly religious. But in a way that is not being an asshole about it, which makes it much more reasonable, at least to evil atheist to me. So yeah. Want to talk about the Donkey Show?
Yeah, let's talk about the Donkey Show. What are your initial thoughts on Kinky Kelly and the Sexy Stud?
I'm just gonna say Kelly can be a girl's name, can be a boy's name too. Hey, man. What a performance! Just what a performance! I love that he actually references Bachelor Party, which I think was the first time anyone ever heard of this concept. A donkey show? Are you serious? And then in classic Kevin Smith thing, he twists it. It's not like a hot chick gonna fuck a donkey. It's an ass. It's and it's donkey. Wow, what a just what a scene to have in a movie. I don't know if you remember the controversy about this. I think it's Sundance. The conservative Christian movie critic Michael Medved actually was watching this film, got 3/4 of the way through the donkey scene. The donkey is first shown on screen, and he just throws up his hands and walks out like, "All right, I'm done." Yells it as loud as he can. I'm out of here.
That's what made him
walks
leave.
out of the movie theater. Yeah, that was the moment. Like, all right, I'm done. I cannot sit here anymore.
Oh man.
It's amazing. And it's funny. Like for a movie with a donkey show, as part of the climax of the film, it's such a sweet film. It's such a sweet, it has this emotional core. It has this, it uses the donkey show as the moment where the two main characters profess their love for one another. And, in the jail, you kind of get the big cathartic moment between the two friends and this kind of long commentary on that. So I think it's interesting that, Kevin Smith has always kind of courted controversy and courted raunchiness, but really at their core, these films, all three of them are very earnest. About the feelings they have towards their character.
Yeah, the donkey show. Like the interesting thing I thought is like when Rosario Dawson comes in, her character comes in and, hey, she wants to stay and watch this, and it's like, yeah.
Well, she's like, when am I ever going to get a chance to see this again? Like you immediately get
Yeah.
And Rosario Dawson, like not only one of the most beautiful women in the world, but a rising star at that point.
Yeah.
And it did this movie where she's saying things like ass to mouth. I think that was on the commentary. Kevin Smith was like talking about casting Rosario Dawson. He's like, I never thought that she would say yes because come on, you stupid idiot. Like, why would? But she was game for everything. Apparently,
yeah.
She was down. She was the original choice to play Miri in Zack and Miri Make a Porno.
Oh, really?
And I think, as much as I love Elizabeth, what's her name?
Banks.
Banks, yes.
Yeah.
I kind of want to say Elizabeth Shue, but that's wrong. As much as I love Elizabeth Banks, Rosario Dawson would have made that film even better.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
But Rosario Dawson, just great in everything. I do love her here. I love that she immediately she feels like a part of this world. And you get this immediate relationship, between her and the other people in the movie. I think one thing that you can, we don't give enough credit to Kevin Smith for actually having these really interesting female characters in his movies, because we usually think about the guy with the backwards hat making jokes. Clerks II is one of those movies that kind of speaks to me on a personal level, just because of where I was when I saw it the first time. I think it's held up pretty well. I don't think that it feels as much a important movie in the way that I think both Clerks and Amy kind of feel important still. But I think it's a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it, especially, if you're a fan of Kevin Smith's movies, you should have, this is probably already on your DVD shelf, so.
Definitely, Clerks 2, as much as I love the original Clerks 2 is the one I'd pop in more often if I just want to really laugh, because it's definitely got more laughs. It's that cartoony element, so it works better.
And they're talking about Transformers movies at the time, in the film. At the time, the Transformers franchise was still in pre-production. They had not, Kevin Smith put his finger on how stupid the Transformers franchise was going to be before it even premiered, which I think is always a classic. Now, it's also there are extended bits about the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Which was that huge franchise at the time, and now that it's all been tarnished by 3 Hobbit movies, I think we've now interesting how it definitely feels like a 2006 movie in this very it's definitely made in a particular place and time, and it really feels like a part of that place and time. Yeah. Anything else you had to say about Clerks 2?
The only other thing I'll say is there's no way 4 people are going to run a fast food restaurant. Where is the night shift? Because there's no way 4 people work all day at a fast food restaurant. It just doesn't happen.
Looking at the traffic patterns in that restaurant, and looking at how they're closing, it's barely getting dark, and they're come back in an hour, we'll be closed up. This restaurant must close at like 7. I kind of get the feeling this is in like the shittiest neighborhood ever.
It must be a fucking ghost town, man.
I mean, well, and again, speaks to suburban New Jersey in 2006. I can only imagine that this probably isn't all that unrealistic. In fact, if you look at the playground, this is one of those details that they mention in the commentary that I didn't notice until they mention it. But if you look, the slide literally comes down into a parking spot. Like that's how shitty this restaurant is supposed to be. That it just like you would slide down the slide and you'd go into a parking spot. That's how bad this.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, no, it's such there's so many little details. And again, comparing Clerks and Clerks II, you see like the difference that 13 years makes between the we're working in this little independently owned shitty video store and Quick Stop to and now we work in this corporatized fast food place with like Beanie Babies on the cash register. And also Movies was carryover from Dogma, obviously. And the whole reason that Movies existed was so they could do the golden calf reference. So kind of tells you what Kevin Smith thinks about global capitalism, maybe. We'll leave that there for now.
So I guess we can move on to Chasing Amy, and this was 1997, and this was after Mallrats, which sort of critically tanked for Smith. So he went to a much more sort of personal, much more mature route, I guess. This one stars Ben Affleck as Holden McNeil, Joey Lauren Adams as Alyssa Jones, Jason Lee as Banky Edwards, Dwight Ewell as Hooper X, and of course you got Jay and Silent Bob in this one as well. They basically make an appearance and everything. And this is about Ben Affleck's character. He is a comic book artist. Actually, so is Jason Lee and Joey Lauren Adams. Him and Jason Lee's character, they're best friends, and they have the Blunt Man and Chronic comic book, which is based on the real-life exploits of Jay and Silent Bob to a certain degree, and they become very popular with it. And essentially, the circles they run in, Affleck's character is introduced to Joey Lauren Adams' character, Alyssa Jones, and he falls in love with her. Very quickly falls in love with her. But to his chagrin, she is a lesbian and may or may not have the same feelings for him. And the movie is essentially about his sort of coming to terms with the idea of being in love with her, and to a certain extent her coming to terms with whether she can actually be in love with a heterosexual male. And I don't know if I want to go too much more in depth right now on I think that's generally the plot structure of the film.
Well, that's certainly the tagline. Like that's kind of how the movie is sold.
Yeah,
that's certainly kind of the first third of the film, or the first kind of the setup. Chasing Amy is one of those. I think, again, looking back at it now, it feels very. Again, it just feels like a regular movie today. Whereas in '97, it really kind of felt like, wow, they're talking about this shit like on camera. I think. Politically, you can kind of, today, you show this to like queer people today and not in context. I think it feels dated, but I think it also speaks to certain things in this community that are kind of issues even today. In particular, I think that, the film was kind of sold. Alyssa Jones is a lesbian, quote unquote, in the movie. She's kind of portrayed as a lesbian, but in reality, she's I don't know how she would self-identify if you were to ask the character, in 2015.
Yeah.
But, she's pretty clearly bisexual, queer, somewhere on that spectrum. She was, kind of living as a lesbian. She was living in relationships with women exclusively. But I think that's kind of the background that you get. I think that this film gets kind of unfairly said, oh, this is the story about a lesbian who learns to love dick. And no, that's not the story at all. This is the story of an experimental girl who dated a bunch of asshole guys in high school in fucking suburban New Jersey who, were probably not the greatest guys, and then found out, hey, maybe I'll go date girls instead because I'm attracted to both, and found a community that embraced her. I'm not trying to speak to that experience, certainly, and I'm oversimplifying, but again, this kind of goes back to the idea that the way that the movie is kind of perceived in popular culture is not really the movie that Kevin Smith wrote and directed. I think that this is really Alyssa Jones's story.
Yeah.
We're just seeing it through Holden McNeil's eyes. We're seeing it through his perspective, but it's her, falling in love with him as much as it's his falling in love with her. And I think the story that we don't get to see, except for in one scene, is how she is perceived by her community.
Yeah,
We get to see that one scene, but I think that that's really a much more that would have been another side of the story that I wish that if we'd had another 20 minutes in this movie, I think that I would have loved to have seen a lot more of that. There's a deleted scene with Ileana Douglas was actually like this character who sees Holden McNeil coming into Alyssa Jones's place and basically tells him to go fuck himself because you're never going to get with. She's a lesbian. You're never going to be able to get with her. And so the policing of Alyssa Jones's sexuality by some of the people in her life is another thing that's kind of under the surface of this film. Again, as long as talking about sexuality and sex comedies, I mean, that's a really important part of the film that people don't talk about a lot.
Well, a lot of the sort of broad criticism I saw of this film was people said, even if they were giving positive criticism of the film, they were still saying that it felt like there was like a lot of generalization and sort of naivete of the sort of homosexual culture in general. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think maybe there's not enough of it on screen where it's fleshed out to the degree it should be. But there are some pretty vivid hints at discrimination and actual depth, like actually exploring how members of that culture are treated within their own circles. I mean, reference again back to Alyssa Jones, the way she's treated by her friends when she says she reveals she's dating Holden. But also there's the what's his name, the black homosexual. Yeah, he makes mention of how he is a minority within a minority.
Right.
He talks about it even more, and I find it interesting how he has to play up being a black militant.
He's playing two roles, and essentially he's playing I'm the militant black guy. This is what I do for my profession. I have to hate whitey in order to sell my independent comic books.
Yeah,
which is a legitimate thing that, like, especially in the late '90s, the comic book world, you were first starting to see these people of color, the kind of the minority voices were starting to kind of enter comics. But certainly, as you see with last year the Gamergate thing, and you see the comic book world today, 20 years later, we're not really much better in terms of actually like embracing these other voices. And there's still this sense of trying to keep them out. So the idea of like playing to this community of people that will buy your books and then playing up the controversy to get your name in the headlines was absolutely like a real thing, I think they are kind of playing it for last year, and they're playing it as this kind of overt comedic bit. But I certainly understand why he would want to play that role. But then in his personal life, he's also playing the kind of mincing gay stereotype, which you can see is performative in the same way, just for the audience of the men he wants to sleep with.
Yeah.
Also, you kind of, in the scene in the CD shop, which is another sign this was made in the 90s, there's a CD shop. But the scene in the CD shop, he even says, I play with the expectations of what the men who want to sleep with me think I'm going to be like. This is a man who, you get it in glimpses. I mean, ultimately, I think what people are criticizing, and I mean, rightfully so, is this is a straight, cisgendered white man telling the stories of gay people to some degree, which is a legitimate criticism, but it's not the story it is the story of the white cishet guy, this cishet straight guy, coming into contact with these subcultures. The minority voices are given strong voices. They are not fantasy figures for the and they're not, the kind of wise Negro character. You don't get that sense of, Hooper has his own life. He has his own perspective. He's friends with Holden, but he's not, there just to solve Holden's problems. He's doing his own thing.
Yeah, this isn't Will Smith and Ben Affleck.
This isn't. No, that was Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. Yeah,
this isn't Bagger Vance. No, not at all.
Yeah.
But I think that there are. I absolutely love seeing minority voices written and directed by minority voices. I think those are really important films. I think that we should probably do a LGBT sex comedy at some point in this series. I'm going to try to find a good one, and maybe we'll do Kissing Jessica Stein or something like that. Which would be a fun one. But I was thinking about it while I was watching Chasing Amy. I'm like, we should probably do that, just to kind of put that one more thing in there. But I think that I like seeing the other voices. I like seeing other voices written and directed by minority voices.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, again, in 1997, this feels a lot more radical than it does today. Because in 90s, that was before there was a will and grace. That was before, now we have this expectation that we're going to see these kind of voices in cinema. There just aren't that many movies made in this time period that even had gay people in them. Yeah. Unless it was made specifically for a gay audience. And I think that is significant. Kevin Smith used to do these Q&As at college campuses, and the first 3 or 4 of them they ended up making into DVD releases. An Evening with Kevin Smith. They get increasingly shaggy and kind of turn into like Shaggy Dog podcasts towards the end there. But the first one is particularly good. I think there's a lot of really great stuff in it. And he's actually confronted by a young girl who is a lesbian, who's maybe 19 or 20. And she says, I feel like that this movie just says a lesbian just needs a deep dicking and she'll be cured of her lesbian nature. And I understand why people would feel that way. I would certainly never take that away from anyone. I don't think that's what Kevin Smith is trying to say, but he also makes people ask him, why do you put gay shit in your movies? And he's like, well, my brother's gay. And my brother always told me, I never get to see myself on screen. And so I try to put that in there where I can. Yeah. And I think he had to fight even to put the little bit that he could put in there, in the 90s. And I think you could blame him a lot more today for having less of that. But I think, certainly for the late 90s, he's doing a pretty damn good job with this film, politically speaking.
Yeah, I agree, because he's got Affleck's character in this. He's essentially another version of Dante to quite a degree. I mean, he's another guy who, just like Dante in the original Clerks, he feels really inadequate when he finally finds out about Alyssa's past. He doesn't feel like he can live up to it, and also he's just really confused. Like he has no real familiarity with the world he sort of entered into. So he doesn't know how to deal with it at all. Like he just makes all the wrong decisions again.
Well, he's this white bread suburban guy.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's Red Bank, New Jersey is 2 hours drive, or not even 2 hours drive, I think, from New York City. And so growing up there, you kind of grow up in the shadow of this like dark place with all these deviant lifestyles, but you're living in the most white bread place in the United States in a lot of ways. I was 17 years old when this movie came out. When I saw it the first time, I was probably 17, 18. I saw it on video. I'll say that there's certainly this element of, at that time, I definitely kind of saw what Holden's going through and kind of being like, man, there's this girl who's got all this experience and, how am I ever going to live up? And that's essentially what he says. Yeah. And he pushes her away. He finds her behavior toxic to him, that he can't understand why she would have had these experiences. But today I'm completely on Alyssa's side, because what right do you have to judge me for the decisions I made sexually before I met you? And you need to get over yourself, you fucking asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
He makes a lot of bad decisions. Again, Smith is using the Holden McNeil character to criticize his audience in a way, because there's a lot of his audience who identify with Banky and Holden and think that Alyssa's just a pretty girl. Oh yeah, let's look at her tits, man. But Smith is bringing you in there, and then he's like slapping you in the face by saying, "I'm not going to be your fucking whore." As Alyssa says at the end of the film, which I think, again, rewatching that now, it's so. I mean, it was uncomfortable to watch it before, but now I watch it, and it's that final scene where they're all on the couch.
It's pretty jolting.
I had to stop that 3 times just to okay, I need to take a break from this scene just for a minute. It is so uncomfortable because it is such and it keeps cutting back to Alyssa, and she's just she's sitting there, and I'm completely in her shoes because she is just seething with anger at this guy. Who's just betraying her,
Yeah, she's just don't say it, don't do it, don't fucking cross the line.
You've missed the point entirely.
Yeah.
The one little bit of trivia I'm going to throw in here for Chasing Amy is the end of during the scene after the hockey rink scene, when they're in the parking lot, they're having the argument. Alyssa's talking about her sexual past, and she name drops two people, Shannon Hamilton and Gwen Cooper. Shannon Hamilton is Ben Affleck's character in Mallrats, and Gwen Cooper is Joey Lauren Adams' character in Mallrats. Which because she implies that like she and Gwen Cooper slept together, meaning that in the VS universe there are two Joey Lauren Adams who got it on together, which I think it's a pleasant image, you know.
Which is something I'd like to see. She also drops names. She was friends with both Caitlin Bree from Clerks I, who she had a relationship with that involved fisting.
Yep.
And she was also friends with the girl who died in the aneurysm in the swimming pool.
Oh yeah, Julie Dwyer.
Yeah, and her sister is the girl who was writing the book in Mallrats about sexuality.
Yep. Trish the Dish. Yep.
Trish the Dish. Yep. So, and they make mention of that. I'm going to see my sister. She's coming to visit me or whatever. Oh, the one who wrote the book. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, I missed that detail. That's Now you're right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, all kinds of little moments like that. Also, while we're talking about Rick Darris, the guy who was sitting next to Ben Affleck in the hockey rink, who has the line like, "Even I knew what she was going." That's the guy who played Rick Darris. Always nice to just chart the connections there. You know, there are so many people in the VS universe who all look like each other.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I love Chasing Amy. I think I like it more now than I did even then.
This is only honestly, this is only the second time I've watched it. Like I watched it years ago, and when you recommended it for the podcast, I was quite interested in seeing it again, and it even works a lot better now watching it this many years later. There's definitely stuff I picked up in it this time around that I didn't pick up before. I still, when I first watched it, I still did get the crux of the story. I realized what was going on, but I guess maybe it's just having the context of watching Clerks 1 and 2 basically on the same day kind of helped inform it a bit better. So yeah, like if you look at all the stuff he's done, it's probably his most maturely written movie. Like it's probably his peak as far as that sort of thing goes. It's definitely his most realistic, grounded one. I mean, even Jay and Silent Bob, when they come into it, they're not playing characters; they're playing real people who are making fun of the idea of what's this bullshit about snoogans and Gucci and all that.
You get the sense that these are the real people that the characters in the other films are based on. You know, much more so than they don't act like cartoon characters; they act like real people.
Yeah.
And Kevin Smith gets a long monologue, which kind of explains the point of the film. And Holden completely misses the point of that story.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, again, kind of watching it now as an adult, I realize, wow, Holden missed the fucking point of that story, didn't he? Which was supposed to be, dude, get over yourself. There's this really hot girl who you love dearly and who loves you, and just accept her for who she is. That's the point of the movie. And Holden doesn't get it at all.
And at least by the end of the film, he realizes it, and supposedly more mature by the end of the film.
One more bit of trivia before we get done, because I think we're wrapping. I could talk more. I could talk about these movies all night, but the original guy at Miramax who discovered Kevin Smith at a Sundance screening is a guy named Bob Hawk. He appears on the Chasing Amy commentary. There's an excellent commentary. One of my all-time favorite commentaries to listen to is the commentary on Chasing Amy, which has Smith and Ben Affleck and Scott Mosier and a bunch of other guys in there goofing around, and it's a great commentary. I've probably listened to that commentary more than I've actually watched the movie, believe it or not. Because it's just that fucking entertaining and informative. But Bob Hawk is on that. He is actually in the movie. He has a bit part. He has a little cameo appearance. If you remember the scene where Hooper is standing behind the bar and calling Holden and convincing him to come out to see Alyssa, there is an old white man chuckling at a comic, and that is Robert Hawk, who was the guy who originally discovered Kevin Smith, and without whom Kevin Smith would not have the career he does. So
it's kind of funny too. This movie was before Big Lebowski, but it reminds me of that scene with Julianne Moore with David Thewlis plays this sort of weird artistic
right
gay guy laughing uncontrollably about weird shit. Yeah.
So anyway, that's my other little bit of trivia. I'm just gonna throw that in there because
awesome.
That's a bit that people don't necessarily catch. That's Bob Hawke.
Right on.
Any other thoughts about Chasing Amy?
I think this film's probably been overlooked a bit. I think people know Smith for Clerks and Jay and Silent Bob and stuff like that more, and I think that's a shame. This is probably his best written film. It actually tackles some really serious subjects in a more serious manner. It doesn't overlay it with a lot of broad comedy and slapstick and stuff like that. I think people should check it out. It's if you're looking for Kevin Smith's real serious indie movie in the 90s, this is one of those ones. This is one of those ones that stacks up with the sort of other independent 90s films, although I guess this isn't really an independent film at this point. But
I mean, it was funded by Miramax, but it's definitely it has that, if you're looking at like quote unquote independent cinema of the 90s, which is, it kind of became a genre that even though studios are funding it, you kind of got that particular kind of look and feel. This is one of those highlights. This is really one of those, like, this is what I would love to see more movies kind of made like this from this kind of perspective.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to see. It's, again, I love it. I could talk about it all day, about all the.
We might have to go back at some point and maybe just like talk about Clerks on its own or something like that and really fucking geek out on it or whatever at some point. But
you know what we should do? Commentary, live com.
That would be good. I've been sort of thinking about trying to get that set up so we could do some commentary. I definitely want to do some with my brother as well, just here right on location. So yeah, we're gonna have to figure out how to work that out, either over Google Plus or Skype or some shit. But yeah,
we'll figure it out. Cool.
Awesome. All right. Daniel, tell everyone about your Doctor Who podcast.
I have a Doctor Who podcast. If you've been listening to this show, you probably already know about it, but it's I do it with my wife. We talk about Doctor Who, classic and new series. It's called Oi Spaceman, a Doctor Who love story. That's oispaceman.libsyn.com. Yeah, and check it out if you want to listen to me over intellectualize old TV shows. We are kind of working through companions. We're in the Tom Baker years. We're going to be there for a little while. When the new series, when Series 9 shows up, we're definitely going to do all those episodes. And we're going to hate on Stephen Moffat some. So just can't wait for that. If people want to listen to people hate on Stephen Moffat, that's our show pretty much. So.
And speaking of commentaries, your last episode was a commentary episode. Yeah.
We did a commentary on the Tom Baker's very first episode, Robot, where that was fun to do. It's definitely different than what we normally do, where we kind of try to condense and get things down. But it was fun. So check that out. People like that. I haven't gotten any feedback on it one way or the other, but people like it. We'll do more of those. That was fun to do.
Right on. So if you are interested in finding more of Daniel, Paul, or I's links, you can find it in the little trailer that's going to run after here, telling you where to go to our official Podbean site. Other than that, I totally blanked out that we should be picking some music for the end here. So if you have any suggestions,
for me, the answer is that I thought about this for a while, and the only real answer is the Alive, the song that Joey Lauren Adams sings in the bar.
Oh yeah,
and the video, that snippet is on YouTube, so you can rip that pretty easily.
With that sexy raspy voice she's got going on there, yeah.
And then she makes eyes at a blonde across the room.
Yeah.
And that blonde was Jason Lee's wife at the time. One more bit of trivia for you. So in that moment where she's making out with Carmen, the actress there, Jason Lee's across the table, you can just think, yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Daniel, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Thanks a lot. See ya.
This is for that someone special out there. Ready?
I'm feeling nothing but all alone, just missing someone I don't even know. But until I find them, I'll wait patiently. So I wait for that glorious day when the one I dream of comes my way. And when our lips touch so tenderly, I know I'll feel something inside of me. I wanna feel passion, I wanna feel pain, I wanna weep with the sound of your name. Come make me laugh, but come make me cry. Just make me feel alive.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For our other episodes, links to Daniel, Paul, and Lee's other stuff, and links to some great podcasts of similar interest, visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. There you can leave us comments on the site or directly email us. We listen and respond to everything. Thank you. Drive through.